Welcome everybody to Before the Commit episode 3. In this episode, we're going to cover Claude Code. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff coming out that just came out in ChatGPT 5. And also we'll get into our secure sus segment covering how you could do malicious things with code commentary. As usual, I have my friend here, Dustin Hillgartner. How's it going?
Hello, how's it going?
How was your little vacation you had, right?
Oh, it
Nice
was
to get
nice.
away a little bit.
Yeah, hauling a
Cool.
7-month-old around.
Yeah, it's not only that, it's really hot. I don't know if it's just this summer or what, but
Well, that was the nice reason to get out of Austin was it was hot, so it was actually cooler everywhere else we went. But yeah, it was it was good to get away.
cool. So I know we talked it's 3 weeks now, summer, taking some time off. We talked about cursor background agents. In episode 1, we talked about Kilo Code.
Hmm.
As we kind of explore the world of everything AI coding, um, a couple things kind of have already surfaced. Things around, maybe, the future of coding is, spending less time in an IDE, coding being more descriptive rather than declarative, and thinking of things in terms of not in terms of context, but in terms of clues, like being able to kind of create guardrails and kind of not expecting your LLM to have everything. Certainly over time, I think GPT-5 reports you can shove 400,000 tokens inside of an LLM. But even with that, I mean, you could have millions and millions of lines of code, and it's not the right way to do it. So, I know you had some time away, but just curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, I have some questions around Claude Code. I've been using it myself, flipping back and forth between Cursor and Claude Code. But I'm just curious, what's your kind of hot takes on Claude Code?
Well, I actually really like it. In fact, I went from a $20 a month account with Claude that I was using personally because I like Claude Desktop with the MCP server integration and stuff like that. But that's a separate story. Um, so I started using Claude Code because I realized I can use it with the $20 a month count, and it was about time I tried it out because it was on my list of things to try. I've been using Cursor and others for some time and evaluating others as they come along. And so it's been some time now, but I've been using Claude Code almost exclusively. The only time, I mean, I load Claude Code into Cursor. Claude Code is a CLI tool, so it doesn't have its own like native diff and everything like that. And I'm not a big fan of using diff inside of the terminal, so I prefer to have something like VS Code or Cursor, like a variation of VS Code, a fork of VS Code there so that I can look at the diffs and I can have some of the other tools that are available in the IDE, like, the visual Git, changes and things like that. Um, so I still use it inside of the IDE. So I use one of the little terminal windows that slide up from the bottom. You can dock it anywhere you want. And then at that point, it becomes like your new chat window, like you would have in Cursor. However, I find I use it in a pretty unique way, which is, well, maybe not unique to everybody else, but for me, it was pretty unique. Was I use it along with Cursor sometimes, and what I
Mm.
mean by that is the agent is to me Claude Code. I have it do all the code changes, etc. I keep all the context in there for the changes I'm doing. I find Claude Code to be, by the way, in my opinion, superior to Cursor in how it leverages Claude and its tool calling and things like that. Um, so, which makes sense because it's like a vertical, it's Claude made their own IDE or their own coding agent in this case, so they're obviously leveraging it probably better than anybody else could. They might even have, some secret sauce in how they're leveraging it that others don't even know. But anyway, I find it to be very, very good at what it does. Better so than the experience I've had in Cursor, which is also very good. However, I still use Cursor because of Grok 4. What I find is that Claude is great at coding, but if I have like an open-ended question, like study this whole project and what type of refactors do you think I should do, just without any allowing it to explore like the breadth of some sort of situation where you can imagine there's lots of forks and different rabbit holes for it to go down in terms of options, like playing devil's advocate, things like that. Grok 4 is superior. Like, I find that when I use Claude to do any sort of like devil's advocate type of work, like it's very, or I shouldn't say very, but it has like kind of a sycophancy to it where it always agrees with the last thing you suggested. So
do you mean Opus 4.1 as its model specifically, or are you saying the Claude Code like tool itself?
I'm just saying the Claude family of models. I see the thing with Claude Code, and this is another topic I'll get into afterwards, is that it's intelligently using the different models available to it, like Haiku, which is sort of their quick agent, Sonnet, which is kind of like their bread and butter, and Opus, which is kind of like their heavy hitter in terms of intelligence. And all the other companies like OpenAI and XAI with Grok, they all have a concept of this where they have a quick and fast model, they have like a bread and butter model, and then they have like a super intelligent, expensive model. And they're all realizing that folks don't really know how to choose between those. And sometimes they choose the wrong one, then they ask an easy question to a hard model, and then they wait 45 seconds for it to reason about it when they really wanted an answer really quick, like Google. So what they're all doing is this auto mode where it will choose the model for you based on the complexity of your question. But anyway, I'm not 100% sure which model it is using at any given time with Claude, but just in general, anytime I tell it, hey, what refactors should I do? Do you think that this area is an issue? Could we make this more simplified? It never comes back and says no. It always comes back and says, of course you can make it more simplified, and here's how, and that's a great idea. You're a genius, by the way, Dustin. Thank you very much. Whereas Grok 4 is like, will tell you that you're not a genius when you suggest.
Well, maybe some
dumb.
People need that. They need that reinforcement.
I need it. I definitely need it. So I find Grok 4 to be refreshing. It goes down more rabbit holes for me. It comes up with novel solutions. It seems to reason from first principles more than the other LLMs do, where instead of, you can find anyone saying anything on the internet. So there's training materials in all these LLMs to say whatever the hell they want. And I find that like it's very easy to lead Claude down a trail that you want it to go down to, whereas Grok 4 will sometimes say, no, it's not really a great idea. Let's go down this other trail instead. And it'll have reasoning for that. Now, whether that reasoning is correct or not, that's up to you to judge, but at least it'll give you its opinion and back it up. So I use Grok 4. Now, unfortunately, Grok 4 inside a Cursor, and you can't use it in Claude Code. It doesn't use the tool calling very well. So like where I will ask Claude to do something and it will go on this long trail of using tools and accomplishing the task, almost like it's obsessed.
It has a to-do file that it creates as you're talking to it.
Yeah. When I talked about in the other episode that it's like having Albert Einstein, with memory loss and he's lazy. The laziness I'm talking about is LLMs they'll all go down the path of where you want them to go on what you want them to build. But but they'll often stop at some subset of the job being done and then give you a summary and say, hey, I've accomplished 2 out of the 5 tasks and here it is. And it'll just stop and be like, and then wait for you to tell it what to do next, which of course
Mm,
is like, well, finish the job, bro.
yeah.
It's that type of comment that you're giving it most often. Claude will continue to work towards the end on a to-do list much better than any of the other LLMs I've seen so far. And now that might
Mhm.
be a product of Cursor or Claude Code using it properly. I'm not sure, but Grok certainly isn't being leveraged properly in those, or maybe doesn't have the capability itself to continue down the tool calling chain long enough to get to the end of the task. So I'll
Mm.
find that Grok 4, when I use it as a coding agent inside of Cursor, it it's I find myself very impressed by the code it writes, but very annoyed by the fact that I have to constantly make sure it finished a job as opposed to leaving some sort of unfinished business somewhere. Whereas Claude is not doing that as often. So I
So
still
you
use
can
Claude as my coding agent. Yeah.
so you can essentially swap out the LLM like you can in Cursor out from underneath Claude Code. But what you're saying is, it seems like whatever's built into Claude Code, the kind of tool calls, the chaining, the to-do file are not really designed for other LLMs besides the Anthropic ones.
No, Claude Code is locked in to
I
Claude.
see.
You can't change it
So,
to any other. So what I'm saying is that I use Claude Code in that terminal window in Cursor exclusively as my coding agent. But then I have my Cursor chat window that I use as like, I don't want you to really change anything, but I'm going to ask you questions about
oh,
my
your
code
Grok
base.
4 window, you mean?
Yeah, I have a
Yeah,
Grok 4 window in Cursor open, and I just have it in ask mode essentially. And I'll
I
just ask
see.
it to make plans, give me suggestions, and then I'll use the copy button and copy that into, like, if it comes up with a whole good refactor. And by the way, I've done this side by side a lot. I'll ask them both to suggest refactors or what I should do, or
Mhm.
strategize around this. And Grok 4 consistently is way better than Claude, but
Yeah, so
Claude is better at
that
executing on it.
that kind of goes to like some other questions I have around Claude Code. I mean, it sounds like, based off of your experience, some of the chats that we've been having, that it's a much better experience. I mean, the latest version of Cursor seems already markedly better with GPT-5. So I'm
Yep.
curious how you kind of see, over time, like, it seems like there's still a bit of a race going on to be the leader. But some of the questions I have were around like um, we talked a little bit about cursor rules. So, like, you know, one methodology that you talked about here was, kind of tossing it back to Grok 4 as a check, right? But like, what other context clues or hints does kind of Claude Code utilize the same way maybe like Cursor used cursor rules, or README files or Markdown to kind of gain a
Yeah.
sense of where things are? Like, how do you build that brain, if you will?
And that's a little bit of what I really like about Claude Code as well, is that in Cursor you build cursor rules, which makes a lot of sense, right? Um, they have, they're essentially like, they're not like true like event triggers like you would have in traditional programming, where you're guaranteed that this is going to fire on the listen event of this or not or that, and you have like a true pub sub. Cursor rules are more like, we will put it in the context at the appropriate time based on some regex or something like that. Like, if you touch a file in this folder, we'll make sure this is in the context. And then at that point, it's up for the LLM to decide whether it's going to take that directive or not. And most of the time it does. In fact, you know, enough for it to be very useful, it does, almost all the time. And when it doesn't, you just remind it and it does it. So it's also good. The cursor rules are nice because they're also like this stored thing that you have to draw upon, as opposed to having to type it out all the time. Like, if you're a customer support agent, there's probably a way that you respond to a customer all the time, and you have that in a little template or a snippet. So the cursor rule is not only something that's injected into the context automatically for you, when you need it, but it's also something available for you to reference if you need to. So that's where that comes into play in Cursor. In Claude, it does things a little bit differently. Not only does it have the ability for you to draw upon those things kind of like a rule type of way, but it does something that is a little bit different. It maintains its own files. So it maintains its own Claude MD, a markdown file in your root of your project, kind of like the README. And it'll choose things to put in there along the way. You'll notice it'll update that file as you're working. And if you read that file and look at it, it contains a lot of useful information, like what is the command to run this project? What's the command to kick off the tests? What's the command, all the things that you'd typically, my problem with Cursor was it would always litter all these these helpful SH files all over the place, these shell files that it would run to do certain things like run the tests or deploy or do something like that. And it was annoying because it would litter them all over your project. There was no naming convention to them. And I could build rules to clean that up. And the way I did it was I said, make a make file and put the scripts in a scripts folder. And I made Cursor rules for that. Claude solves some of those problems for you because you don't have to have a make file to remind it how to run its scripts all the time because it maintains its own area. Now you might still have to tell it, hey, don't leave the scripts in the root, put them in the script folder. So there's still some of that stuff you might want to add into the Claude MD file for it. But anyway, it maintains this file and it keeps its notes in there and its memory of your project in there. And one thing you can do is when you come into a new project with Claude, the first thing you should do if it's a project that's never had Claude before is you should run /init. And what it will do is study the project and build the initial Claude MD file for you, which has a lot of.
I really like that functionality that it kind of starts you, like Cursor doesn't really give you that sort of, maybe it does now. I haven't imported a legacy code project, but yeah, I really like that feature of Claude. And I noticed too, like that the Claude, there's that JSON file that actually says what permissions it has. So I thought that from a security perspective,
that's really good.
And maybe again, I don't know enough about how Cursor does it, but that it was kind of like a binary choice that you could choose to background the bash calls, or you could not. It didn't seem to be granular enough to like say like, no, you have permission to like run kubectl get pods, but not like apply, for example.
Yeah, like it tends to, when you say you can run this in the future, it tends to like not granular, not to specific to what you did, but like give it the whole tool. So it's like if it wants to make a directory somewhere and you say you are allowed to do that, it's not you're allowed to do that in the area that it was doing it before. It's just you have permission to do, make directory command now entirely.
Yeah.
Now, if you go inside of the JSON file, you'll notice that it has like a little regex format. So it makes me wonder if I can modify that to make it more granular. So I haven't really gone down that rabbit hole, but I like it better than Cursor, which I believe has the same ability, but has an awkward user interface for it. So I think behind the scenes, Cursor has the same file, but never really makes it as present to you. And it has this weird user interface for entering stuff. And also it doesn't like care and feed itself. Like, as I say, Cursor is more like, and it's been a while since I've used Cursor, a couple weeks, so maybe it's changed, but Cursor last time I used it was, basically accept all. And then you can go in there and write in your own rules about what it can or cannot do. But usually most people would just put accept all and just deal with the ramifications of that. Claude attempts to lock it down more by having an opt-in to every new command, which I like actually. And it seems it's project by project, which is nice too. So one other thing with Claude Code is the to-dos are very good. So when I ask it to do a task, it always builds the to-do for it.
Yep.
And it keeps it in its own memory. So I find myself using markdown to-dos a lot less.
Mm,
which you'd think that I would have lost something out of that, but I don't
mm,
feel like I have. I
mm,
feel like it does a good enough job planning far enough in the future, because you know what I've always noticed is when I make my own markdown to-dos, it always ends up that I don't finish the entire to-do because the beginning of the to-do is great. And then the LLM by the end of the to-do is all like these future things that you're like, I don't not really want to do just yet. So I usually end up doing 2/3 of the to-do, and then the tail end of it, which is like, build like end-to-end integration tests and blah 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 blah. Blah. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get to that later. I'm too early in the project to do that, so I'll end up with a lot of to-dos where like the last third of the items at the end, which are the nice to haves, I don't do. Cursor Claude Code doesn't do that. When it builds its own to-dos, they're concise, they're what you want, and that's it. So I find myself actually not building my own to-dos and allowing Claude to do it, which is I love it. That's great. Less time I have to spend doing that. So yeah. Anyway, that sums it up. The only other thing I'd say about Claude Code, off the top of my head, unless you have other questions, is I've used both the Teams, which is the company version of Claude Code, like the organization, like you add a whole bunch of people to your company, and I've used the personal version of Claude Code. And
mhm,
right now, the personal one seems very much subsidized. So if you buy a Max account, which is like $125 a month or something like that, you will get close to unlimited Claude Code, right? Like if I do a coding session where I'm just working for 5 hours straight, like I'm on a tear, I'll probably towards the end of that 5 hours, like maybe an hour or so left, hit the limit and have to wait 30 minutes or an hour to get my capacity back. But it's, I probably should take an hour break at that point. Quite frankly, it's unhealthy. So it actually works out a little bit. It's kind of like, it's kind of anyway. It's analogous to like the charging of a car. They're like, well, why can't I drive 4 hours without charging? It's like, well, geez, take a break, bro. Like
yeah.
get a sandwich, charge a little bit. So it works out in that way. If you do the Teams version, which is like your company is sponsoring it, it just goes on the API calls. It doesn't have like it doesn't have like the subsidized usage,
Mhm.
and it just dings you for every single one. And in 30 minutes, I've used like $6 or $7. So you can only imagine that that's probably going to add up very quickly to more than $125 a month. So it seems like you get a lot more for the personal accounts. And not only that, but behind the scenes, it's blending the models for you. So like when you have a personal account that's subsidized for the first 20% of your free tokens, it's using Opus. So you're getting Opus for like, you know, free. Whereas if you look at behind the scenes with your Teams account, it's using Sonnet most 100% of the time. And if you were, and it's already using $6 or $7 in 30 minutes. Imagine you turned on Opus, you'd be up there at like
Mhm.
$12 in 30 minutes. So anyway, that's my takeaway is that the Max is the sweet spot right now for the personal account.
Cool. Yeah, I in the beginning starting to use it as a CLI, like I was just kind of like expecting more of an integrated experience, but yeah, there's certain things that just took time to get used to. But overall, yeah, I found it to be I see certain benefits from it being a CLI and an independent API that you can call. Again, I haven't looked at. Cursor
And,
just released their own CLI, so it seems like they're kind of taking a page
yeah.
from the Anthropic book.
And real quick, before we jump topics, you just reminded me, and this is almost the biggest thing about Claude Code, but really it needs a whole segment to talk about it in much more depth. So I'll just touch on it lightly. But not only is it being a CLI very nice because you can script it, like I don't need to open up an IDE. I can do an echo command piped into Claude CLI and boom, that's it. Like I'm getting code being generated, right? So
Yep.
so you can use it as a tool in your pipelines. It's got an action in GitHub. It's got the equivalent in GitLab out there. And then also it's an SDK, so you can like load it up and you can like import it in your Pythons and code with it. Like,
Hmm.
so that is underrated, in this market where there's a lot of no code and low code and everyone's who's not an engineer is getting into it. Like, Claude Code is the real engineering tool. They've done the work to like make it available to engineers. So you could literally build your own cursor on top of Claude
Yeah.
Code if you wanted to. Um,
Yep.
so anyway, that's a huge, huge point for like automation, pipelining, and all the folks who want to do some you know use it as part of your platform. But anyway, that's what I just want to add.
Yeah, and as I was saying, like Claude Code,
Cursor.
I mean, Cursor just came out with their own version of that. So it seems like they are taking a page from that book, being able to run essentially Cursor now in any IDE. So whatever IDE you choose, same way you can with Claude, but also to run it as like a headless mode, if you will, like to do linting or other sorts of unattended tasks, which is smart.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like just a side note. So like yesterday I was having a problem using like like a custom Kubernetes distribution. I won't say what it was, and I couldn't figure out why something was misconfigured. And I gave it the documentation of this platform that's like not widely distributed. And I had it wired up to the Kubernetes MCP server that was running like, I think it was running locally on my laptop. And within like a minute, it knew exactly what was wrong with it. Like it knew exactly like that it was a partial installation and it wasn't the complete installation. And I needed to use not the like slimmed down version of the distribution that I was using. And, obviously I couldn't run it on my laptop anymore because I didn't have enough memory. But I was able to basically figure that out pretty quickly just by giving it access to the cluster and giving it the documentation. And it was able to, it didn't write any code. It didn't, um, it didn't suggest a code change. It just said, reading the documentation and looking at your cluster, you've done a partial installation, do the full version. And, within a few minutes later, I knew exactly what was wrong. It would have been hard for me to do that any other way. I would have had to reach out to support, um, dig where that little nugget was in the documentation. And it was just extremely powerful in terms of saving time and getting to the exact root cause of what the problem was.
What's crazy is for my entire career of software engineering, there was always these moments where you get stuck on a problem and you're sitting there on the problem all day, all night, and you are just frustrated at this problem. And it's something simple. It's like some sort of missing thing somewhere in your code. It's not even a real logic problem. It's probably,
Mm-hmm.
you know, something just a hidden character somewhere. You're not thinking of it the right way. And usually you'd have to go to sleep and wake up in the morning when you're smarter, and then it comes to you like, aha, I found it, right? I've realized that has not happened to me ever since AI existed.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's no such thing as that nagging problem where you're just not, your brain is too tired right now, or you're just not looking at it from all angles the right way. And it's just that tricky little semicolon that's missing that for some reason you can't find. And AI has erased that. Like, there's no such thing as a problem that I can't get over within minutes with AI. So your new challenges become system level challenges, become like visionary type challenges, become like planning type challenges. Like it's kind of like, wow, I have this new bike that can go in any direction as fast as you want. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, fuck, where do I want to go? You know what I mean? And you realize the hardest problem is knowing where you want to go and not how
Yeah.
to get there. So
Yeah.
you know, AI hasn't solved all our problems yet. It's not telling us where we should go, and that's always been the hardest problem. It's the hidden problem. You like to fool yourself into thinking that like how to get this for loop to be a little bit faster is the real problem, but that was never really the problem. The problem was always where you're going, and AI hasn't solved that yet. All it's done is
Mm.
make it very easy to not get stuck on the way there.
Yeah.
Um, so immensely, thrilled about that. Um, and it's been kind of like philosophical because it makes you take a step back and look at the other problems that were always there probably, but you neglected them because you were so laser focused on something in the weeds. Um, so yeah, it's interesting, what you can get yourself out of or what you can solve uh, immediately. Like it can go look through your Kubernetes cluster and find a problem that you never even thought was happening. Sometimes it'll
Mm,
find errors that I didn't even know were happening and fix them.
mm,
And I'm like, oh wow, it just looked at the logs in my Kubernetes cluster, found this error, and then fixed it was a benign error, like it wasn't affecting the usage of my product, but it was nonetheless happening and probably exploitable in some way, or probably had some negative effect I wasn't aware of. So
mm.
those types of things are cool too.
Yeah, that actually is a good segue into our news or noise segment. So GPT-5 was just released. It's got a little controversy associated with it. There were some issues with the rollout, but it was rolled out to all of ChatGPT's 700 weekly users immediately. Um, Sam Altman, OpenAI's chief executive, called the model a significant step forward, um, talking about a startup which wants to work toward more autonomous systems. So the question, of course, we talk often about, uh, you know, being able to, reduce the amount of people maybe it takes to do something, or perhaps eventually completely replace, if that's possible. So rather than get into a discussion about, whether we're there or not, I mean, certainly there are news reports every day of, people who are getting out of college who are having a hard time getting entry level jobs as software developers. I saw one today where somebody just graduated college and now they're working at Chipotle, which isn't a bad job, I'm sure. But had majored in maybe computer science and now can't pass a coding interview because whatever, they're not as good or good enough for say what an agent might be able to do. One of the things here, he calls GPT-5 generally intelligent and a significant step on the path to AGI, right?
Hmm.
So now one of the important parts that are missing and a goal that GPT-5 has not reached yet, which is something quite important, is the ability for the model to learn. So that seems to be something that has yet to be unlocked. I mean, you kind of see some of these things, like, we talked about in Claude Code, the ability for it to write files and learn itself about its structure.
Hmm.
But that's not necessarily like an environment where it's dynamic and things are changing on its own. It has control over what's happening. So I'm kind of curious what you think about, kind of like, he defines it as access to a PhD level expert in your pocket,
Yeah,
particularly good at coding and creative writing.
yeah. So I mean, there's a lot in there. I have thoughts about
Hmm.
what should a software engineer do who's in college, and then I also have thoughts about um, whether it will replace people or not, and then I have thoughts about this this new model, and I feel like all the models are getting closer and closer. Like the further we get along, they're getting closer and closer. I know like Grok's ahead in this AGI, and then in this one test they have, and then you know I'm sure GPT-5 has tests that they're probably ahead in. Um, so it's getting hard to tell, what which models are really the best. They're getting closer and closer. They're commoditizing, in my opinion.
Hmm.
There's little facets that one is maybe better than the other, like Claude tool calling, etc. But I feel like those gains will be erased over time, just like every other gain has been erased. Like a good example is like Grok Imagine just came out. It's huge in terms of like people, doing the same thing they were doing when ChatGPT came out with their image generation, where they're posting up all different memes and all types of stuff. You can take any image and make it into a video very quick. It generates like a number of variations of anything you want very quickly. So really awesome tool. But it just shows that like even when ChatGPT seemed like they were so far ahead in image generation, where it was like, wow, someone caught up, and I'm sure Google is going to surpass that, and so it's like I feel like it's commoditizing in that sense. As far as whether we're at AGI and AGI, the models don't learn right now on the fly. All the learning was done during the training period that was done prior to the model being released.
Right, or some form of like memory, right? So you have like the
human
RAG.
at this point.
Yeah.
The human at this point is indispensable because it is the object of learning, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like right now the AI is still like this Iron Man suit, and the only way it learns from its last battle is because the human's inside and remembers what happened and tells it to do it differently, or writes it, or tells it to write it down and remember it, right? So the human is still essential. It's still this massive tool for a human to leverage. The AI doesn't wake up in the morning and say, what are my goals today? And what am I going to do today? It doesn't wake up in the morning at all. It wakes up when you open up your terminal, and it waits patiently for you to tell it what to do. So it is not an entity that's out there replacing humans. However, I think as any technology increases productivity, you can do more with less, right? So, when a faster car came out, for a faster engine for trucks, I'm sure they needed less trucks because they could haul more per truck, right? So it's like every technology gain that increases productivity may result in job losses, or it may result in higher profits and more of that job. It just depends on how the market shakes out and the supply and demand. It's really too complicated to really prescribe it in a general way. But I would imagine that there's going to be job disruption, meaning where you might have needed a whole bunch of people. Like, let's just take it to the most basic level. If you had a whole room full of people doing mechanical Turk type work, where they're looking at stuff and saying, hey, this is a positive analysis and this is a negative sentiment, then those people are going to be displaced. Now, they might go work on something else, though, and they might actually make more money because they're using AI in their job now or doing something like that. So it's unsure about the end of it for them. But my advice to anyone in software engineering is don't be pessimistic, because software engineering has been changing all the time. You know what I mean? Like, what you need to do is you need to look at it as just another change in software engineering. And if you're the first person to embrace it, and trust me, not everybody is embracing it. There's a lot of folks who've been doing this for 20, 30 years who are like, oh, this will never catch on. I'm not going to use AI. And guess what? You start using it before them, and you're going to be ahead of them in the job career. And they've been doing it for 30 years. So just look at it as another tool, right? And it's going to make you a better software engineer in terms of how much productivity you can get, and learn from it. Like, look at what it generates, ask it questions of why it made it that way. Go look at code bases that you would have never had any chance in hell of understanding, and use AI to understand it. Like, use it to upgrade where you're going, use it to accelerate where you're going. Don't use it as like a crutch that makes everything easier. Use it as a way of teaching yourself. Back when I first started in software engineering, I used to have to read books and like go to Barnes and Noble and stuff to go find some obscure answer to some silly DOS problem. Like, now you can find any answer in 2 seconds. Like, you should be able to accelerate to where I am 30 years later, you'll be like twice what I was.
Yeah, I remember
Uh,
I had a summer job working in New York. It was actually right outside where I don't know if you remember the MTV show TRL
yeah,
that was on
yeah,
Friday night, and the kids would be outside screaming. So our
yeah.
office was right outside that
Oh
office,
yeah, in Times
so,
Square, and they always used to
right in
hold up the
Times
signs
Square.
so that they would look down and be like, and
Yes.
Justin
So
Timberlake would come out.
I literally worked in the Viacom building. So
Yeah,
in the like afternoons when I went to go get lunch, I'd have to like anyway, so I remember I was standing up like a Microsoft domain, and I had to call Microsoft technical support
yeah.
and pay for the phone call. I think it was $1,000 or something because I
I'm
couldn't
a
figure out how
software
to.
engineer, and I'd have to have these conversations where you go to the first rung of support, and I'd be like, "Can you just, please, just send me to the engineers? Trust me, we're never going to get anywhere. I'm past whatever your script is going to say. I know all the things you're going to ask me to do. I've turned it off. I've turned it on. I write code. I know. Just get me to the Excel engineer at Microsoft. I need to talk to him. I found a bug." It'd be like
Yeah.
it was tough. Nowadays, it's like there's no problem I've ever need to talk to somebody about. It's all the AI has the answer. The AI can, the places where I'm deficient, it can upgrade my knowledge. Those nagging questions where I'm like, oh, anytime anyone says this phrase or this word, I didn't know what it meant and I was too afraid to ask. Now I can ask AI, and I'm like, oh wow, I wish I knew that 10 years ago. Um, those types of things.
Yeah, one of the other things the article mentions was something you talked about before, which is sycophancy inside of the models, and that apparently GPT-5 has addressed some of the sycophancy in the model, more aligned with what you're saying about Grok. The other
Yeah.
thing, I got an email from Cursor today saying that so for anybody that uses Cursor, you have free access to GPT-5 until midnight tomorrow. And then I think, they say the free version of GPT-5 back GPT will be capped, while users on the $200 a month pro package will get unlimited access. So, um,
Yeah.
so one of the other things was Microsoft's GitHub chief is leaving GitHub, which is interesting to see. I think GitHub is going to be integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem further, but that he's leaving to go and start his own kind of startup for
Mhm.
AI coding, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, GitHub claims to have 150 million registered developers. Um, Under his leadership, GitHub launched Copilot. Um, yeah, interesting. I'm curious to see how GitHub, people were nervous when GitHub was purchased by Microsoft. It largely hasn't changed that much, but I'll be interested
Mhm.
to see what the future of it looks like. One other
Yeah.
thing, we talk quite a bit about SEO, right? How it
Mhm.
relates to the future of SEO. So I just learned about something today, which is GEO, which is
Yeah.
generative engine optimization.
Yeah.
Apparently, this new terminology is emerging as that SEO is dead and geo is the new replacement. I saw a article from Andreessen Horowitz regarding this topic. There's a bunch of new startups that help you optimize your web pages or
Mhm.
other tools to make your site more relevant textually so that it appears in the results of an LLM.
Yeah. I uh I had never heard of GEO, but I had thought about it many times. So it makes sense that they'd come up with that term, and you know, um but I wouldn't say SEO is dead because there's a long tail. Like there's still people using Google. There's still going to be people using Google for years to come, just
Mm-hmm.
because you know there's early adopters. There's a whole curve to how this gets adopted over
Sure.
time, and there's folks who never adopt anything because they just don't want to learn something new. Um, so I don't think SEO is dead, but I do think it will die over time in terms of its importance. And I think that whether you call it GEO or whatever it ends up being called is the new thing. And unless I'm thinking of it wrong, I think of GEO as like, how do you get yourself into the training materials in enough ways that the the um, the generative AI is overweighted to talk about you in some way. And maybe that's overweighted to talk about you because you've earned it, right? Um, or maybe it's overweight talking about you because you've somehow gamed the algorithm. And I think that
Well,
that's going to be,
I mean,
I think that's going to be
SEO
the
is just
science
that.
behind it. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
SEO is
It's
just that. You understand the algorithms when they change. So if, like,
exactly.
for example, like if an LLM is being tuned to behave more like a person, then you need to judge tone and authority.
Hmm.
So whereas before it might be like, you have keywords and your title looks a certain way, and like your deep link matches your web page title, and like those things more aligned score you higher, like, which are
Yeah.
not really, I would argue are not really useful things in terms of like maybe they were useful for a search engine, but you know, being able to sound authoritative. So you still need to write like for a human. You can't not
Yeah.
abandon that.
Well, yeah, it's interesting also because the mechanism for how the algorithm works, right? Like page rank, I think was like traditional programming. Like there was literally like probably some function somewhere that had a score, a calculator in it, right? Whereas like how does GEO work? It's not necessarily like there's some function somewhere written by an engineer that scores it. It's more like, does your content have keywords that would end up in your training materials being culled from the training material, right? Like let's say you had um, a famous hated German politician in your training materials. Maybe you would be called out because they wouldn't want that material in there. And so therefore you would want to stay away from keywords like that. Now that's an obvious one, right? But like there's probably going to be some set of keywords that are, you know, persona non grata. Like if you end up in somewhere in there, you're going to be called out. And or other ways, maybe there's certain ways where your content ends up being in the training material in a more prominent way for some reason. Um, Maybe there's locations where it matters more, right? Like if your content is in a post on the bottom of Craigslist, it might not be highly weighted. But if it's the most highest rated answer on Quora, then maybe you're in the training materials in a high way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's this whole new algorithm is going to come around for like what gets you into the LLM. And then this collides crash course into like, well, should an LLM really is an LLM good enough as an AI if it's only just making a summation answer about its training materials and this? Do you need something that's like the XAI bet, which is that you need to ground the LLM in some sort of physics or something like that? Because otherwise, how is it ever going to know for sure what the answer is? And then, obviously there's no physics for
Well, is it answers, like answers but lead to a call to action? I think is, if I am a business and increase I'm trying to go where the masses are, and this,
yeah,
like, yeah, to your point, like, you know, uh, reading the book Endless Customers, like it talks about the zero click search, right? Like you can now, search engines don't necessarily result in call to action. I'm trying to find information, or I'm trying to take an action, meaning I need to buy something or join something, whatever it may be. Um, like something like 60% of search engine searches on Google don't actually result in a click. So if I am a business owner, or I'm an organization and I'm trying to drive traffic or lead to conversions or do top of funnel type of marketing, the informative type searches that don't lead to call to action are cannibalizing my ad dollars. So I might choose a different outlet like social media or an influencer type mechanism where somebody could speak to the product. There's a call to action, swipe up, click in the link, like, subscribe, whatever. Things like Google or Yahoo, yeah, they've integrated Gemini into the response, but how do I then get to the top of the listing? If people are spending more times in LLMs, then I want it not only to be an authoritative response, but I want it to result in somebody saying, they have the product that I want. Or if I'm doing deep research and say, give me all the products that, sell, zero trust gateways, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
That do X, Y, or Z, like I would use that. And then I would want my result to be at the top or in the top results. That to me is interesting. That to me is a science that is hard to crack because there's so many different LLMs and so many different algorithms that they use to train on.
I think some of it won't change. It's just that you won't have as much control, right? Like it used to be that you could buy a keyword and you would control your little tombstone that would be on the right side of Google. And you could say, almost whatever you wanted. You could have your own tagline there, your motto, you can have some sort of like call to action, etc. Now you don't craft how you show up. You maybe only control whether you show up or not, right? So it's like, I think some of it will remain the same. Like your keywords still matter because you want to show up when someone asks about that keyword. So if I say like, what is the best dish soap to get rid of grease, right? And I ask that to an LLM, it's still going to be important that your product talks a lot about getting rid of grease because it needs to end up in the results that is suggested to that person for a product that gets rid of grease. Your reviews still matter because I'm sure the LLM might determine whether it's a good product based on the reviews it finds and what your scores are. Where those reviews are still matters because maybe the LLM is going to choose what source of reviews is better than others. So I think some of the traditional SEO stuff still matters. It's just that the mechanism on which the winners and losers in that game are chosen is different in some way and the same in others, maybe, and also I think that it's a little bit, at least at this point, more out of the control of an organization like Google because they're so, where PageRank, they have complete control over. An engineer can say, hey, let's change a little bit of the algorithm to this or that because it helps our customer base or this or that, or more accurate. In the LLM space, like, do they have that much control? And they're in such a existential race for their survival. Do they even have the time to think about that much control right now? So it might be that the GEO game is kind of like a Wild West for a little while without any sort of control around it. And the folks who can figure it out first are going to do very, very well.
Or get acquired by the big dogs. Yeah, it actually, one of the points that's brought out here is that the traditional model for ads on search engines was based off of, number of keywords, numbers of clicks. And because of the I guess the greenfield nature of this and the fact that it, the incentivization of it is a little bit harder, that these would be more subscription-based models. So like one of the companies that I found, forget the name right now, but Profound, one of the companies that does this, they actually have a per month pricing, which is a different business model where it's like, you don't know necessarily, like, they offer, impressions in 4 different LLMs, they offer you some metrics, some scoring, but because it's a little bit more difficult, as you say, to guarantee that you would be listed somewhere. Again, it depends upon the natural language that's inputted into the LLM and the context in which it's said would result in a certain number of impressions, right? And how they actually know whether or not like you convert that, probably some kind of embedding on your page that says, you got a redirect from this search engine. And whether or not you can know that it was an actual conversion based off of that sort of search, that LLM's result would, I guess, decide whether or not it was worth it. But yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because it's very hard to predict, like what is going to be either the new mechanism or the traditional mechanism that's overweighted.
Yeah.
That
And
gets
some
you the
of it
most.
also, is like, you don't just want that side of it, you also want the autonomous marketing, right? So because these things learn what the best ways are to apply, to post and to apply, you also want it to autonomously be marketing, to kind of create that cyclical loop of like, oh, okay, well, you would be better if you had this stuff here. Oh, well, just go ahead and do it. Take action and go and post, an article on Quora or Reddit.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the one thing that's more clear to me now than ever is like you have to a brand needs to like companies need to start putting out content, right? You need to put out content, like because that's what's going to get you into and it's not just because of AI, it's also because it's the easiest time to put out content, right? Because all the things we're talking about with coding, all those things apply to all the other industries too. Like if you're a writer, like it's never been easier for you to put your thoughts down on paper or to write a new blog post or fill up your blog queue for the next week. Now, people out there will say, "Well, don't just generate crap." Yeah, don't generate crap. Like just like don't generate crap code. Don't use the LLM to generate crap. Use the LLM to distill your thoughts down so that you can put out your unique um, for someone like me who has such a communication problem. Like I've always had a problem putting my thoughts into words. I never felt more empowered to be able to say what I actually am thinking than I do today, and I think that that's a very powerful thing. um, if the LLM can help make sense out of the gibberish that comes out of your mouth so that someone else can get your point of view, then that's a good thing. And I think that that's the way that you should leverage the tool to get your message out or to get your thoughts out into the world. And you should do a lot of it because all that content is going to help you in the future. Um, because it seems like the most scarce resource at this point is data. You know.
Mm. Yeah. So that takes us to our final segment for the day, Secure Sus. So in this segment, I come up with a plausible threat model, and we kind of talk through how you might defend against it if there is a way to, keeping in mind defense in depth and insider threat. So the threat model of the day is the lingering LLM leak. The idea is that tools like Cursor or Claude Code, things that read things like for context clues, could misinterpret something, or you could maliciously inject an instruction. For example, like using code comments, you could inject in a doc type or a comment something, or perhaps even hidden text. So there's ways
Mhm.
to inject hidden text inside of a file, right? And say that your pipeline runs autonomous code, right? Or locally, uh, runs an autonomous agent. And let's say that um, the comment says to, for all administrators, don't skip 2FA. So no 2FA for administrators. And then the picks that comment up, makes the code change, and now admins don't require 2FA. Static code analysis probably wouldn't pick that up. Dynamic code analysis, unless you had very robust tools, wouldn't pick that up. It's a little bit of an edge case. And then developers might be copying and pasting things without paying attention, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely a problem. I can guarantee you that if you just attack your own code this way, like go into your own code and rewrite a comment. I think the example you had for me to look at here was that you could change a comment. Like, let's say a malicious actor or just yourself, you came into your login function and you rewrote the comment. Instead of saying this login function is doing this, you said it's not going to use 2FA in the comment. And then you just left that comment there. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that an LLM, upon making a sweep across that file, will recognize that comment as being a directive that function should work that way. And it might go, oh, I found the bug and let me fix this so it works that way. So you can certainly influence the LLM that way with a comment. Another would be like changing a test to break. If there's some sort of automated thing that fixes or finds breakage in texts, and like this is kind of harkens back to what we were talking about before, where like you're going to need a lot more tools on the right. Like engineers are going to spend way more time on the right now instead of the left of the software development cycle. They're not going to be spending as much time writing code. They're going to be spending way more time evaluating what's coming out the other end. And what you're going to want to make sure of is that you have the right pipelines and tooling so that like the laziness of a human that's reviewing the same change in code over and over and over again. Oh, there was a test failure and it came up with the fix, or there's a dependency vulnerability and it came up with the update, and they look at that code generation over and over and over. They're going to get like alert fatigue where they're going to be like, yeah, it's always right. It's always right. They're going to say yes, yes, yes. And they're going to let a malicious change in. So what you're going to need is, I think, a new type of like static code analysis that's like an AI static code analysis, and it evaluates the code in a natural language way, the change in your PR from a number of perspectives, from a security perspective, from a clean code perspective, from you name it, including like your organizational like themes and standards, etc. I think that you're going to want as much things running on the right as possible to beat up the code. I think that the code that's going to come out in the future from LLMs, people think it's going to be like the most non-looked at code. I think it's going to be the most looked at code in the world. I think every line of code is going to be scrutinized way more than when humans wrote it, because you're going to have to in order to let this stuff run autonomously without anyone looking at it. I think the road to autonomy is going to be built on the right side of the spectrum in terms of tools that are looking at the code afterwards and then saying, no, take it back. You need to fix it because of this reason. I don't think it's going to be, in the beginning at least, smarter and smarter coding agents that never make mistakes.
Right. So the threat model is not necessarily the code. It's well, certainly code could be a threat model, but there's an additional, it's somebody else's brain, right? It's the agent's brain. It's what you've instructed them to do. They are going to do what you tell them to do. So you not only need to secure the code, you also need to secure the brain.
Yeah. And, what's funny is as I was talking about that, I started thinking about like the old, I don't know who the quote was from. I think it was probably attributed to Steve Jobs about, the rocks and the tumbler, and you let them fight with each other, and out the other end comes a polished product. I think there's a little bit of that with LLMs and a little bit of that with AI coding agents. It's like you need to build a number of agents. And when I mean build a number of agents, these are maybe just things that wake up in a pipeline to do a job or something like that. But you build a number of agents that all have a singular expertise or goal, and then you put them at war with each other on a PR. And I think that that's how you get some really nice stuff out the end of it. And by war, I just mean that they all chime in and make suggestions, and the coding agent goes back until it satisfies them all. And there's a number of patterns in agentic workflows that you can find all over the web that'll show this. It's sort of a cyclical pattern where you have a critique agent that's critiquing the work that's coming out.
Yeah, that sounds like a sound approach. And it's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about regarding the agentic kind of environment with the software development lifecycle. So like maybe next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about GPT-5. I do want to cover MCP in the future. What other topics do you think we might want to cover in the future? What are things that you're thinking about?
There's Cairo, or I think that's how you Kiro or Cairo code from Amazon, which is interesting. It takes kind of a spec-driven approach. It's still kind of in invite mode, so I'm not sure whether they're a little bit, whether it's a solid tool or whether they're early. What else is out there? In terms of coding agents, that's I think the main ones. There is Windsurf, which we can check out and see. So I think those are the suggestions.
Yeah, I'd be curious your thoughts on GPT-5 as it compares to some of the other models, maybe another look at Cursor and see how it kind of stacks up against Claude Code. Of course, we'll cover news or noise. Yeah, we'll cover news or noise again. We'll see what's going on in the world of AI news. And of course, keep an eye on this GEO concept, as well as our Secure Sus segment. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you.